Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis, and I have another deck profile for you today, this time on Eevee box, specifically with Flareon and Sylveon. There are other builds out there with like just Flareon, but I think that Flareon Sylveon is definitely the most common way to play the deck right now, the most successful, and the strongest, and that's because Angelite is an incredibly powerful part of the deck's strategy. I think that the deck probably wouldn't be super playable without Angelite. It's really a key to making the deck work. Multiple of your matchups really rely on it. And this combination of Burning Charge into Carnelian or Angelite, and then having cards like Briar and Kieran is really interesting. It's like it's a very cool deck. I think that honestly it's very unique. I don't think there's a lot of decks that have like functioned like this in the past. It has just a lot of tools at its disposal. I think it's like pretty hard to play, and it's definitely like very well positioned at the moment. I think that consistency is probably the deck's biggest flaw. It's a lot of moving pieces, but the Noctowl engine is very powerful and can get you over that hump a lot of the time. So let's go ahead and get into the list. Very close to the list that Ian Robb made top 8 with at Milwaukee. I think it's only one card off, maybe two. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that it's very, very similar. So I want to give credit where credit is due before I get into it here. Starting with the Pokemon, we have two Flareon EX. It's your main attacker in multiple of your matchups, and you're pretty much always going to want to use Burning Charge to take your first prize and set up your next attacker. There are like some cases where we like want to go for Angelite or Carnelian right away. But most of the time, we're using Burning Charge as our first attack to make sure that we have two attackers set up to carry us through the game. And then we have Sylveon, which is here for the Angelite attack to shuffle two of our opponent's bench Pokemon into their deck, and then we can transition a Magical Charm on the following turn. So Angelite is very, very powerful against evolution decks, being able to put them behind, force them to set up a way wider board. Force Gardevoir players to have 3 Ralts on their board instead of 2. Otherwise, we just put them behind a turn. Very consistently, you just basically say, okay, you're not attacking next turn, and then I'm going to go ahead and Magical Charm on my next turn, and then if you don't get a strong enough setup, I'm just going to Angelite again. Angelite is a very, very powerful tool, and we'll talk more about how to use it in sort of the matchup section there, but very important that we have 2 of these, because multiple of our matchups it is key in. I'm like one copy of the Eevee EX to have a basic Tera Pokemon that we can throw down for Noctowl, that also can evolve into our Eeveelutions. 200 damage, 3 energy attack isn't anything to scoff at either, but it's mostly just here to evolve into Flareon or Sylveon. It's also nice to have like a bulky Eevee to evolve from if we're trying to avoid like a Phantom Dive knockout on the bench. Next we have the 50 HP Eevee, the boosted evolution Eevee. The 50 HP is definitely pretty weak against things like Phantom Dive or Dusclops. However, the ability is simply too strong not to include. Just have the option to go ahead and evolve right up into Flareon or Sylveon immediately. And then we are playing one of the 70 HP Eevee. This is the typical split, the 1-1-1, just to have options. One of the 70 HP Eevee just to have an Eevee that can survive things like Phantom Dive and Dusclops. And just playing a 4-4 Noctowl. Noctowl engine we are super, super reliant on. We want to use Noctowl almost every turn, honestly. Obviously there's turns where we don't need to if we already have everything that we need. But we want to have consistent access to Noctowl throughout the game. 2 copies of Fan Rotom for getting us set up early on. Search out our Hootoots, Noctowls, and Eevees. 1 Terapagos EX to have another basic Tera Pokemon for activating Noctowl. And also just to have like a attacker that we can set up very quickly. The only other Pokemon that can hit that much damage in our deck is Carnelian on Flareon, which takes an evolution and 3 energy to get going and can't be used 3 turns in a row. So especially for knocking out something like Fezandipiti for our last 2 prize cards, Terapagos is really, really strong, and then of course just serves a dual purpose of being able to attack earlier in the game against things like Raging Bolt and activate our Noctowls. 1 copy of Fezandipiti. Yeah, pretty much staple. I won't over-explain how good Fezandipiti is, just drawing 3 cards almost every turn once knockouts start coming down. And then Mew EX for more draw support. I think having both Fez and Mew has become pretty staple in these Noctowl engine decks, just because you are so hand disruption is usually what gets you, right? Like, you have to get the Noctowls into your hand first. So having some as much onboard draw power as possible, very, very important. And then we are playing one of Clefairy X to make sure that we can beat Dragapult consistently, have a way to one-shot those Dragapults, mostly with Sylveon's Magical Charm, since Angelite's a pretty key part of the matchup. We're going with Angelite and then Magical Charming the Dragapult, but of course we can also just power up the Clefairy as an attacker in its own right with a Crispin in one turn. And then we are playing the Latias EX to have that extra bit of mobility to move our base equipment around, make sure that we can be attacking with what we want to when we want to attack with it without much difficulty. Supporters, we are playing 3 copies of Crispin to get our energy on board, to get our Sylveon and Flareon set up. 2 copies of Iono for that disruption, especially in combination with things like Angelite. It's also just like a generally good draw card early on. 2 copies of Boss, making sure that we are keeping up our prize trade, whether we're going with a Flareon strategy and trying to make sure that we like take 2 prize knockouts every turn, or we're going with a Angelite. We need Boss for Angelite plays to make sure that if our opponent has like Gardevoir EX active, 1 Ralts on the bench, then we can Boss something else, and then go ahead and Angelite the Gardevoir and the Ralts both back in. 1 copy of Briar. This is part of what makes some of your matchups favorable that wouldn't otherwise be. Would otherwise be closer to even, because you can go ahead and Burning Charge into a single prizer for your first knockout. So again, something like, let's use Goldengo, I think is the most obvious example, where your opponent is going to have a 1 prize board early on. And this way you can just take a 1 prize knockout to start with, and then they bring out the Goldengo, you take 2 prizes on that, and then you take 3 prizes for your next knockout. So it allows you to win in 3 attacks without having to go 2-2-2 exactly. You can go 1-2-3 instead. Obviously, you can come up in other situations as well, but that's the general reason Briar is so good, is being able to go for the 1-2-3 prize map. Then we're playing 1 copy of Kieran. Switching is actually pretty important in this deck, since Eevee and Flareon, or Flareon and Sylveon both have annoying attack retreat costs, and you don't want to have to discard the energy from them. Flareon also needs its attack to be reset in order to use Carnelian 2 turns in a row, so having Kieran as a switching card is very important. Also helps against things like Itchy Pollen Lock. And then we were playing 1 copy of Brock Scouting, mostly as a Noctowl searchable way to get our Pokemon out under a Badoo, which comes up quite frequently, to be honest. We're just going like Noctowl for Brock to search out your Sylveon or your Flareon, or even your Latias to get something that's stuck in the active out of the active position. Then we have 1 copy of Professor's Turo. Removing some liabilities from the board, of course, can be sometimes important, but it honestly mostly just serves as another switching card, especially one that can get Noctowl out of the active spot and then reuse it again later. Against things when your opponent's like trying to trap it in the active with Itchy Pollen, since it's your only not Noctowl, your only not Itchy Pollen target. If you have to like Kieran a Noctowl out of the active in order to knock out a Badoo, and then your opponent just like goes for a Badoo, knocks out and Itchy Pollens into your Noctowl again, it can be pretty annoying. So being able to just like Turo the Noctowl out of the active spot, have a Noctowl that you can use next turn now if you want to, since it went back to your hand, you can put the Hoothoot back down, and then also not have the evolution on board anymore, so Latias can give all of your opponent 1 free retreat, which is very, very, very nice. For items, we have 4 Nest Ball. We're just trying to find that Fan Rotom as often as possible. 3 Ultra Balls for more consistency finding our Pokemon. 2 copies of Buddy-Buddy Poffin, since we do play a lot of 70 HP Pokemon. We want to have pretty wide boards. We want to get like lots of Hoot-Hoots out, as well as our Eevees, because like I said, we do want to have. We are pretty reliant on Noctowl. We want to have like a lot of Noctowl usage throughout the game. 2 copies of Night Stretcher to make sure that we have consistent access to our energies mostly, but of course getting back things like Fezandipiti, or we're only playing 2 Flareon and 2 Sylveon, so if we need to use like 3 Flareon a game, or even just 2 and we prize 1 of either of those, then having the Night Stretcher in the back is also pretty important. Also really, really nice with Noctowl in general, especially if your like Area 0 gets bumped, you can discard your Noctowls and Night Stretcher them back for more usage. 1 copy of Switch, like I was talking about with Turo and Kieran, just mobility is very, very important for the deck, especially for your Flareon EX, resetting the effect on the Carnelian so you can use it 2 turns in a row. 1 copy of Counter Catcher, so that we do have some comeback potential, especially if we are doing like the 1-2-3 prize map. So we go 1, our opponent goes 2, and then we can counter catcher for our Briar play. Also really nice with Angelite if our opponent gets like a strong setup, and then we want to like counter catcher around their attacker so we can shuffle it back in. Then we have 1 Super Rod, just more recovery. This deck plays not that many energy and pretty thin lines of all of your attackers, a lot of one-of Pokemon as well. And of course, we do still play Ultra Ball, so we might have to like discard some stuff that we don't necessarily want to. We are not always going to have Latias down right away, so we might have to retreat away some energy that we don't want to. So a lot of recovery is important in this deck. 1 copy of Earthen Vessel. This is something that I know that I changed about the top 8 list. I didn't like not having like an item that I could search off with Noctowl to get my energy out. Obviously, you don't need it every game, but when it matters a lot, especially for like boss or Iono plays. You want to make sure that you can, off a Noctowl, like get the supporter they want to use that turn, and then also guarantee your energy. 1 copy of Tera Orb to have just an easy way to search out our Flareon and Sylveon mostly without having to discard things. Pretty important, especially synergistic with Noctowl, and it also allows us to search out like Eevee EX and Terapagos to just get our Noctowl online in general. So really helps with our early game consistency. Stadiums, tools, and energy. We have 2 Area 0. We're not like super reliant on having a big bench at all times, since we're not our damage is not necessarily dependent on our bench, but having 8 bench is still very, very powerful just for being able to fit a lot of support Pokemon in play. Especially, early game, we typically don't need the Area 0. We get our Noctowls off, but then once we're starting to attack, take a lot of prize cards, we want to be able to fit like our Fezandipiti and our Mew and our Latias all down so that we don't start drawing bad off of Ionos and things like that. And then we're playing the 1 Sparkling Crystal as our A-Spec. I've played on Fair Stamp and Prime Catcher in this deck before, but Sparkling Crystal is definitely the most consistent A-Spec for getting those early pulling off Flareon and Sylveon attacks quickly as consistently as possible. And then for energy, we're just playing 2. So 2 of each. Obviously, Water and Lightning are the most important since they work with both Flareon and Sylveon. And then we have the Fires for the Flareon and Psychics for the Sylveon. We don't want to not have access to any of these, so we got to play at least 2 of each of them. And I honestly think that 2 is enough. Usually, especially with double Night Stretcher and the Super Rod and the Earthen Vessel, triple Crispin, you have so many ways to search these out. This count is usually going to be more than sufficient. Sparkling Crystal as well, so. That's with the list done. Let's go ahead and talk about our matchups. So starting with the favorable matchups, we have Raging Bolt. Of course, this is a good favorable matchup to take, having just won Milwaukee Regionals. But basically, the big thing that makes this matchup favorite is that Briar play I was talking about, where obviously sometimes you might just like miss an attack at some point, and that's where it's not like a perfect, it's not like a free matchup or anything. They can still, you could whiff Knockout or whiff the Briar play. But for the most part, you're always going to be ahead in the prize exchange because of Briar. You can just take a 1 prize knock out whatever's in your opponent's active spot every turn, basically. Or not take a 1 prize knockout or on your first knockout, and then counter catcher or boss for 2 prize cards on your next knockout, and then just Briar for 3 prize cards with or without counter catcher. And then we have Joltik Box. This matchup is definitely close. Like, Iron Hands can be pretty scary. Obviously, Pikachu can be annoying to deal with. Basically, you want to like use Burning Charge on the Joltik. That way, you are threatening to do the same like Briar line, and that's like kind of your main line that you want to go for, is just trying to go like 1, 2, 3 with Briar. But they might try to, if they try to go like Joltik and just set up 2 Pikachu EX, and that sort of like prevents your Briar line because you don't have enough targets to knock out for 2 prize cards. If they just like limit their bench and just start just solo Pika-ing, then you just like set up your Sylveon, just like Angelite the Pikas back in, and then to try to set up one again, you can like boss it up and Magical Charm it, so that's, and then they can't Topaz Bolt for enough damage on your Sylveon to knock it out without finding a way to the active and back into the active spot, which is very difficult for them to do. So your primary line is just to go for that 1, 2, 3 line with Briar and Flareon attacks. But you do have some other options to counter. Like Angel Light is just like very good into their deck in general as well. Next we have Dragapult Dusknoir. This is one of the matches where Angel Light is super important. We're basically just trying to Angel Light their Dracloaks with energy back into the deck to make it so, and then Magical Charm bossing the Dracloaks that they get out next. And that way they can't get attacked. So if they do get Dragapult set up, you can just bench Clefairy and just take a knockout on it with your Sylveon or the Clefairy itself. Dragapult with out Dusknoir, virtually the same matchup. You're shuffling the Dracloaks back in and then using Clefairy to hit for weakness and sort of chasing the Dracloaks with energy. Both of these matches you just want to be kind of careful about like your Noctowl usage because you don't want to get your Noctowl trapped in the active spot. That's going to be your like biggest lose condition is they like Ichupal your Noctowl and Fair Stamp you, and then like reestablish their board. Next we have Goldango. So I sort of talked about this when I was talking about how to use Briar, but that basically most games you should be able to pretty easily just do that. Just go for 1 prize with Burning Charge, and then or even Fan Rotom, and then 2 prizes on Goldango, Briar on Goldango. And they just don't really have any counterplay to that other than like Iono and hoping that you miss. So then we have Zoroark EX. This matchup is honestly another matchup where Flareon Briar is going to carry a lot of the weight. Darmanitan can be scary here if they get like a turn 2 Darmanitan and start picking off your Hoothoot, so this matchup can be kind of close if they get that sort of like really strong setup really quickly and you just don't have like the draw power to deal with it. However, Carnelian is going to be one-shotting the Zoroark, so if you just get the single prize Burning Charge, go for the Carnelian, and then are able to Briar, you should be in very, very good shape still. Even matchups, we have Terapagos. So basically, you are trying to do the same thing with the Briar play, but I mean, they do have Pikachu EX they can weave in there, they can Iono you, they can Torrential Pump to take the prize lead against you, while knocking out your Hoothoot, so it really just depends on like how strong their start is. I mean, it depends on how well you both draw, basically. You're playing a very similar matchup, you're both trying to do kind of the same thing, you just have different tools for doing it. They're going to try to disrupt you with Torrential Pump and then like mid to late game Ionos, whereas you can also try to disrupt with Iono, but you're mainly going for that like Flareon, Carnelian line. Then we have Terapagos, Boufflant. So this matchup, they kind of struggle to one-shot your Flareons and Sylveons. So that is very nice for you. However, you're going to really struggle to knock out their Terapagos as well because of the Bouffalants. So it's kind of a long game where neither player is like super one-shotting each other. And it's just going to come down to usually who is able to chain their attacks together better and keep taking prize cards. You're going to want to like boss around, boss for like Hoothoot knockouts and stuff like that to try and then hit them with mid to late game Ionos to try to like disrupt them out of hitting knockouts on the things that they want to. And then you just got to make sure that you try to keep a lot of Hoothoots down so that you are also able to keep finding the piece that you need to continually put on pressure and switch between attackers that are damaged. On bad matchups, we just have Guardy. I think this matchup it's not that bad. It's like 40-60, but the fact that as long as they don't prize their Ralts, they can just sort of, Badoo you early, set up a Gardevoir with 2 other Ralts in play, and that sort of plays around the Angel Light. Obviously, if they don't do that, if they have a Ralts prize, or they choose to only put 2 down, you can just go like Angel Light and Magical Charm. Even then, though, like with Badoo, they can always buy that time back and then just hit you with Rare Candy into Gardevoir and start using Miracle Force again. They can set up knockouts on your Eevee or your Flareon and Sylveon without too much difficulty, thanks to Agena Brains. And then obviously Drifloon can one-shot you. You don't play like Jamming Tower or anything like that to punish the Drifloon taking much of damage. And then if they do have the Drifloon, and then like Gardevoir and a Kirlia, there's like not really good Angel Light targets, right? They can try to shuffle the Gardevoir and the Drifloon back into the deck to force them to find a way to get the energy back in the discard pile. But as long as they like get another Gardevoir out, they're still in a fine spot because it is if they have their Munkadori set up, it's pretty difficult for you to actually knock out a Gardevoir. So not an unwinnable matchup. I mean, Flareon, they do need to get multiple Munkadoris out, otherwise they're risking getting one shot by Flareon. Angel Light is going to put a lot of pressure on them in the mid game. However, most of the time they're going to be able to like eventually stabilize and pull this one out, especially with disruption from late game Ionos. So yeah, I mean that's your only bad matchup though, and I think their Gardevoir is still of course gonna be very, very popular. However, not as popular after finally losing its win streak at Milwaukee. So I think with that being your only bad matchup and it still being very, very winnable, I think that this is one of the best decks that you could be looking at playing right now. It's definitely difficult to play, so put a lot of time into it. But I would recommend this as a play for Portland. I don't think you can go wrong playing this deck. Just try not to like cut too many consistency cards from the list, because I think that is honestly its biggest issue, is just finding all the right pieces at the right time. So you don't want to risk too many of the consistency counts for more tech. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to check out more of my content or my socials, links to all of that will be in the description below. And I hope you have a great day.